Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'd like to talk today a little bit about Fire Emblem Three Houses, which is the new Fire Emblem game out on the Nintendo Switch. I've been playing it since release, and I know some of you have been playing it as well. I wanted to make a little bit of a short video on it, just giving my initial impressions. This isn't a full analysis because I haven't finished the game. I have put about 20 hours into it, which should be a big seal of approval for those of you who are wondering whether this is going to be a good game or not. If I'm willing to spend time playing it, it's probably a pretty good game. I'm a very, very busy guy, so me being willing to set aside time to play a game is kind of a big deal at this point. But I am enjoying the game a lot, and I wanted to give you my thoughts on what's going on with the game, how things are working, and my general opinions for those of you who happen to want them. Subsequent videos will deal with more in-depth analysis of, say, how the characters are executed, how the plot is executed, once I finish the story and all that kind of stuff, and unlock all the supports, of course. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about gameplay. The gameplay of Fire Emblem Three Houses is very similar to the previous two Fire Emblem games, which is Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Fates. I'm not counting Shadows of Valentia in that because it's actually a remake of an older version, but it's very, very much in the vein of those two 3DS titles in that there are three different levels of gameplay, or really there's three different types of games that are going on in this one larger game called Fire Emblem. I break down these three different gameplay elements as follows: the battle game, the support game, and the meta game, and I'd like to explain how each of these happens to work in this particular Fire Emblem game. The battle game is what most people think of as the actual gameplay of Fire Emblem. This is the gameplay style that goes all the way back to the origins of the game. You can find similar versions of it in, say, Final Fantasy Tactics or other tactics JRPGs. Basically, this is where you're putting your units out onto a battlefield, which is arranged in a grid. You are strategically moving them around to defeat the enemy or achieve a certain objective. Like recent Fire Emblem games, there's a casual mode and a classic mode for the battle game. Casual mode, when your units die, they come back in the next battle. Classic mode, which is like the games of yore, when your units die, they're gone forever, so you have to be really careful about how you actually use your units. Once they're gone, you can't use them in any more subsequent battles. I'm actually playing on casual mode right now. I know I'm a filthy casual, but I just don't want to take the time to restart every battle as much as I want to actually maintain the lives of all of the units that I want to keep using. I will say, though, that they have softened the effect of Classic just a little bit because they've created a mechanic where you can freeze time and go back in time. You can undo actions back to a certain set point in time 3 times per battle right now as I'm playing it. And during those 3 times, if you run out of those 3 options, you have to live with the consequences with the battle or start it over again. This makes playing on Classic, I think, a lot more fair, particularly if you're playing on hard or difficulty modes. I'm actually playing on hard right now. They don't have an insanity mode out just yet. I guess it's going to be offered in a patch. When it does come out in a patch, maybe I'll restart and play with a different house on classic mode and see who can survive to the end of the story. Now, in addition to the battle game, there is what I call the support game. This is a little bit, much to the chagrin of probably some classic fans of the series. It's a bit like a little mini dating sim within Fire Emblem, or perhaps even a visual novel. It basically works like this. Your units develop relationships with each other by fighting next to each other in battle, and now in this iteration of the game, they can have dinner with each other and with you. So your avatar will build relationships with the characters under his or her command, or the characters will build relationships with each other. If they build a high enough relationship with each other, they'll reach the S support rank, which means they're fully romantically involved with each other and they get married. I actually haven't gotten anyone to the S rank in Fire Emblem Three Houses, so I don't know if they get married and they have children the way they have in some of the more recent games, where they have a child and that child joins your army as a child unit, which I thought was a very interesting part of gameplay. But nonetheless, the support game is really important and a lot of people really enjoy it. In fact, I actually really enjoy it simply because I think it's a really fun, relaxed thing that you can do in between battles, which are a little bit more thought-focused. You can watch characters interact with each other. You can see which characters like each other or don't like each other because there's some predetermined relationship levels. You can see what characters are really like as they start to expose levels of their personality and their backstory through these support conversations. It really is something that I think enhances the overall story aspect of the game. And I do enjoy it, though I understand a lot of classic fans are going to be annoyed by it. The thing is that it's actually optional whether or not you want to engage in this. You can skip all the support conversations if you want to and just completely ignore them. Your characters do get advantages from building up support levels, so that will actually be part of the next part of the game that I talk about, which is the metagame. But the support game can actually be quite a bit of fun, and I think for some people it's one of the main focuses of the game. When you hear people talk about their Fire Emblem waifu, it's because they're really, really attached and interested in certain characters, particularly of the sex that they happen to be attracted to. Now, the metagame is something that is very important in most RPGs, and it's particularly important in tactical RPGs, whether you're following the Tactics Ogre model or the Final Fantasy Tactics model, or you're following in the Fire Emblem style of tactical RPG gameplay. The metagame involves the management of everything above the regular gameplay elements that you're directly doing. So you're managing the growth of your units. You're figuring out what stats they need to grow in. You're figuring out what things they need to do on the battlefield to unlock a certain class, which makes them more powerful. You're figuring out how to get which characters married so that they produce a more powerful offspring in the Fire Emblem games. This is what I call the metagame. The metagame so far in Fire Emblem Three Houses is quite a bit of fun. There's a lot of classes that you can unlock. You unlock those classes either by doing certain things on the battlefield, like using magic, or by training your characters, because you're an instructor in the game, by training your characters directly in certain skills so that then they can unlock certain classes. And indeed, certain classes can't be unlocked without you directly training your students how to do it. Something like a cavalry class where you're riding a horse. Most characters don't come equipped with any riding skill, therefore they can never be a class where they're riding a horse until you teach them how to ride a horse. I actually really enjoyed the metagame so far in Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I appreciate the complexity of it. It's something that I could see being very interested in on a follow-up playthrough on a higher difficulty mode like Insanity, where you really have to micromanage exactly how your units are growing from battle to battle for them to be powerful enough when you actually put them in the battle to not all get completely wiped out and die. So the metagame is very good. I think it's actually the best metagame that I've seen in a Fire Emblem game to date. Now, on to some other considerations. First of all, the aesthetics and graphics. I like the aesthetics of Fire Emblem Three Houses. I love the avatars that they have. They're very reminiscent of other Fire Emblem games, which I like. I do like the 3D rendered models. However, I will say there's an interesting interaction here between fidelity and aesthetics, where they're going for a more anime aesthetic on their models. However, there's not quite enough anti-aliasing going on. So the edges of lots of details on the characters are very jagged. In some cases, the texture that they're using, say on a character's chest, is a lower texture than what they're using elsewhere, which makes that texture stand out and not look quite right. So in general, I appreciate the aesthetic, but maybe it's a problem with the graphical fidelity of the Nintendo Switch. It limits the quality of how those visuals are actually presented. And I find them just a little bit not as good as I would prefer them to be. I like the environments. I think in general they look good, though they don't always mesh really well with the character models. I think it's pretty forgivable though. The character animations I find to be a little bit lackluster. So when you're watching characters interact on a character support conversation, the dialogue's performed pretty well, but the characters themselves move in a very herky-jerky and awkward way. There's a set number of animations that they have, like an idle animation where they cross their arms, and they don't usually look all that natural, and a lot of them are executed in a way that's just doesn't look very good, particularly if a character is supposed to put their hand on their hip or across their arms. There's some polygon intersection. It's just not as high quality as I would want from something like that. However, I also think it's forgivable because I don't think the main focus of the game is on perfect character animations, and some of my favorite games in the past didn't have good character animations, including Dragon Age Origins. The battle animations, I think, are quite a bit better than the animations I see in the little cutscenes. I will say that. As far as the music goes, I do enjoy the music. However, there's not enough variety. I've heard the same song for a long time now, wandering around the monastery, and you do walk around that monastery a lot, talking to people and doing different little mini games that are part of the metagame and part of the support game. It gets a little bit old to hear the same song over and over again, even if you like the song. This wasn't as big a problem in other Fire Emblem games where you didn't spend a lot of time walking around a castle because your character was a little 2D sprite that could walk around the castle in about 10 seconds. The story so far is pretty good. I will say it starts off on not a very good foot because they are trying to use indirect exposition throughout, and that leaves the player in a little bit of a disadvantaged position where they don't know who the main character is. You have a silent protagonist, which is a little bit odd and unnecessary in this style of game, and we don't really know who he is or where he comes from, despite the fact that we're role-playing as him or her, depending what sex you make your character. However, as the game goes on, we figure out that indirect exposition is part of revealing some hidden truths about the character that the character themselves isn't supposed to know in the story. Each little chapter gives you a direct exposition storybook kind of thing that I rather appreciate. Helps you get to know a little bit more about the world that you're exploring in. But in general, I think the meat of the exposition, the meat of the world building and the setting exploration revolves around indirect modes. You exploring the monastery, you talking to people, characters talking to each other, and then the cutscenes which just show you what's happening. So once it gets going, I actually appreciate how the story's working a lot more than how it started. If you find the beginning a little bit awkward, I do think it gets quite a bit better a few hours into the game. Now, as far as the characters go, there's 3 different houses that you can align yourself with. This is part of the meta level or maybe the story level of this game. And each of the houses has a different set of personalities in it that you can interact with. In fact, you can go interview all the people in all the different houses to decide which one you want to join. I ended up joining the Black Eagle house because I thought the characters in it were kind of unique and interesting. There was an opera singer who kind of reminded me of my wife. There was Hubert, who I actually think is one of the best characters in the game. Just super interesting and fun whenever he delivers his lines. There's Bernadetta, who I thought was the most annoying character at the beginning of the story, but I ended up liking so much of her support conversations because she's such a sad case, and she's so funny, particularly whenever she has to do a support conversation with Hubert. I just find those hilarious. She's got to be somebody's waifu. If you like Bernadetta, let me know down in the comments. Black Eagle House, however, also has Ferdinand, who I think is the worst character in the game, both in terms of the battle game and the support conversations and just his personality in general. I kind of wish I was playing classic mode so I could kill him off. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the game right now. Let me know what you think about it down below in the comments section. Are you enjoying it? Are you not? What are the characters you like? Which are the ones you hate? Do you like the story yet? Does it get better? Does it get worse? So let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you guys next time. You can find my books, find information about them at least at dvspress.com, and you can buy them on Amazon or any retailer of your choosing. The newest one is called Voices of the Void, and the second newest one is a high fantasy. It's a little short read that you can get through in about 2 hours, and you can find it for 99 cents at your favorite online ebook retailer.